I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is
I'm just
that
sad
is a
clown.
sad clown.
Proud of my address.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Really excited for a chance to talk through just life and experience with Vandelay this morning. Hopefully we'll learn how he got that name, although many people might know. And then gosh, Vandelay, you've been in F3 for a long time, so I would love to hear just your thoughts, experiences as things have gone on. And I don't know, why don't you just start us with that first workout, who brought you out, and where the name Vandelay comes from.
Okay. So Sweet Tooth sent me an email. A lot of you guys know Sweet Tooth. He's a regular Saturday guy. He sent me an email early on. It was like the first month or two that F3 had started here. He had gotten pulled in by Kurds, who's since moved on to Denver. They're friends through our parish and our school, so our kids were all going to school together. And I worked out, and he sent me an email. A couple other guys too, I think. And I looked into it, and I called him. I was like, what is this thing exactly? I think he had only been once or twice at that time. And I actually, it was really odd because I worked out a long time, and I played sports and usually fairly active, but I had told my wife shortly before that, I'm kind of looking for something else activity wise, just something else workout wise. I just felt like I wasn't, I was in a little slump or something. I said I just need something different, and it was just a couple weeks later I got that message from him. So it's kind of odd. So I went to the first time. I think there was, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 guys there. The most was Saturday at Oracle Boys Town, and went through the workout. I had a good time. And obviously, a lot of people were fairly new there. I think there were even 3 or 4 new guys that day. Low Man was there that day, I think, and CSI and named that day. But went through the workout, and at the end, they went through the naming. The Kurds and Sweet Tooth, a few others knew that I had done a lot of soccer, and I coached a couple of guys' kids, and I was still playing. And they're like, oh, this guy plays a lot of soccer, Pele, corner. I mean, I threw out all these names that people have been named since then. And nobody else really knew me. Somebody asked me, what do you do? I said, I'm an architect. And they said, well, George Costanza on Seinfeld, he was wanting to be an architect. Vandelay. And I'm not sure anybody there knew what that meant at all. But it was funny because I'm a huge Seinfeld fan and buff. I didn't mention that at all. I don't know that I even told anybody that much about me, because guys started in on soccer stuff, and then somebody asked what I did. I said architect, and Vandelay came out. So it's usually some of the older generation guys who grew up watching Seinfeld knew that George always wanted to be an architect. His name was part Vandelay if he was an architect, and so that's where I came from. So
I love that. So, and that was about 3 years ago, is that right?
yeah, I started in July after it started. So I'm about almost 3.5, coming up on 3.5 years or so now. So yeah.
And where, I guess, any sort of insight on, you mentioned you were kind of looking for something different, but any, is that you were approaching maybe a milestone age? I know you maybe celebrated last year, or anything you can key in on there?
No, not necessarily related to that. I would run a lot on my own and lifted weights. I ran, lifted weights. I played soccer with some guys, but I never, it wasn't like a group that we were really connected to. I guess I maybe was looking for some time with people more that had similar mindsets. I don't know that I thought I was looking for that, but I think over time I figured out that may have been what I was looking for. I really enjoy the aspect of being challenged. I think part of my issue with workout is, when you run by yourself, work out by yourself, I don't have a really good measuring stick. And I think working out with more guys and being pushed and realizing, no, I'm not really running that fast, or whatever, or I'm not pushing myself enough. I think that was where I had improvement, is having that ability to kind of have other people to really gauge, am I really doing benefit for myself or not? So
That's awesome. I think, and Pony can attest. I mean, I think he's always got that measuring stick over the guys that are faster than him. So just kidding. So, and I want to know, you know, because I remember really early on when we first started doing some of the discussions after Paradise, I remember you were, you know, regular participant in those. And I think we had some really good conversations just throughout that. You know, it's kind of a smaller group, and we would talk about, you know, how do you develop goals or prioritize your family, all that sort of stuff. But where do you kind of see yourself, you know, as you look at the fitness fellowship and faith? I mean, have you grown in those areas? Are you sort of still pursuing some of those, or where do you see yourself at on that sort of continuum?
Oh, I don't know. It's a good question. I think my time at F3 has really given me more opportunities to really evaluate where I am with various aspects of my life. Obviously, there's not, I've used this as a COT topic before. I have people that I consider have been my friends for, you know, a good portion of my life, or since college, fraternity life, and whatever. But, you know, these are friends I see twice a year, once a year, on occasion. And probably a lot of them, I would say, whether or not I get into real, you know, serious discussions about life and stuff, I'm just not around them that much. Not to say that they're not my friends, they certainly are, but when you're spending every day with people, the level of knowledge of each other and reliance on each other is just a lot different. And so I think there's opportunities to really evaluate where you are life-wise. Obviously, we've talked about this, you know, you compare yourselves to what other people are doing, whether that's workout-wise or just self-improvement-wise or relationship-wise. You know, the Q-Source stuff's been a good thing for me. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm the most openly vulnerable person, or don't share a lot about what I'm generally thinking all the time, but certainly I like those conversations. I like to be tested on things. I, you know, don't mind. I'm certainly willing to lend an ear to anybody all the time, but I think the opportunities to get to know some people, maybe know that there are people that you can count on a more regular basis for, you know, emotional help, personal help, really somebody if you need really to talk to. I think that group of people is zeroed in more with this group in terms of the people you know on a more regular basis, on a more personal level. So in that regard, it's been a lot different.
I wanted to touch on Q-Source real quick since you kind of brought it up. So for the guys that are looking to dive in, right, looking for something new, looking for some connection there, what is it about, I guess, what can they get from attending a Q-Source? I know you've kind of opened up that maybe you don't share that much at Q-Source, or you're not the most transparent, but I mean, what do you take away, and what do you think other guys can take away from Q-Source?
You know, I think probably that venue gives me an opportunity to feel a little more comfortable about that, as opposed to just kind of, you know, regularly sharing a whole lot about myself on a regular basis. I think the interesting thing about Q-Source to me has been, you know, a lot of us through work have been through leadership development and project manager training and all these kinds of things. And quite honestly, the experience of listening to discussions in Q-Source and reading some of that material has probably provided more insight into leading people or being the right follower for certain leaders, or whatever the case is. I think there's more exposure to real life situations, and obviously more than work, but a lot of it can be applied to work and leading people and leading teams. And I think I've probably learned a lot more than that than I've learned in any kind of other leader training, probably because there's a lot more open discussion, right? There's a lot more, people tend to share more about how they apply things to life, and it's not so much in any work, so much setting. The thing people have mentioned this to me before, I would say I'm fairly uncomfortable being in the position of thinking that I have wisdom. Some people have mentioned that, you know, you're the older group people look up to. I don't really, I don't like, I always like to think that
I think it comes with age, man.
Well, I don't like being in that age, but I think I think I'm always still learning. Like I don't know enough to tell anybody what the right decision is. I think in a lot of cases, I don't know that I know the answer to a lot of those things, and so I always think that I have a lot more to learn than I'm able to offer insight on. So I'm always looking to kind of learn from others. The fact that people might be looking for me. I mean, obviously I recognize that. I guess I'm humbled by that position rather than feeling that I'm dignified in that position, I guess. I don't know that I feel what I have to say is any that much more important than what somebody can learn from somebody else a lot of the time. So
You know, it's funny because just your response to that question, right, I think shows the wisdom that some of the younger guys maybe lack, right? Just to know that you don't know it all. And I found myself, you know, I have a hard time not speaking up at those things because I think I have so much wisdom, and I leave sort of wondering, you know,
We know.
I wonder sort of what you're thinking, and you know, we've had a few conversations because you have kids, right? And so
yeah.
You know, the ability to influence or impact our children versus a guy in F3, and like, you know, it's sometimes we can have more influence on the guy next to us in a workout than our
Yeah. Well, it's funny because today obviously is a Q source day, and we had a rather small group at Paradise today, but I had a pre-run with a couple of guys. Splinter and I had some nice discussion on run, and actually during the workout, a few guys, and you know, he has a group of kids, and I have a couple. Mine are older, but he probably knows a lot more than me from the perspective of having a lot more kids than mine being older. Sometimes I feel I have people say, you know, your kids at a certain age, you can't have information about them because they're an adult or whatever. I'm like, my kids are hardly adults, I think, some days, but yeah, they're 21 and 19, so they should be on their way, but we'll see.
What I'm curious. So you know, you celebrated your you know, the 50th birthday sort of during the pandemic. Also took on a site at the Oracle, so really our sort of, you know, mothership site.
Yeah.
You know, talk me through maybe those experiences or other things that you might remember the past 3 years, just things that stand out to you.
Yeah. So I've been in F3, you know, up to 2 years or so, coming on to COVID time, and there were a few people that were very concerned about me getting into the respect category, probably namely khakis for the most part. But the original, the CSOP was planned to be on the day of my birthday, my 50th birthday that year. And we had shut down literally just a month before that. And I had disappointment because I was thinking, well, that's going to be a significant day, kind of cool day, and everybody would be together. I thought, well, that would be kind of an interesting thing. But, you know, the reality is the world was dealing with a lot more important things than that at that time. And so there were a lot of people dealing with real significant issues, and that became rather unimportant thing. But the fact that groups carried through from F3 during COVID time was a huge thing for me, and others have talked about this, is, you know, that carry on of, we went through the isolation period for a while on your own, and then we kind of, you know, small groups sprouted of workout groups, and there's some guys I got to know a little better, you know, some of the writers and Sparty and stuff started, I think, around during that time. That those smaller groups allowed some of us just to get to know each other a little better, but also that reliance that was something regular during COVID. And before, I mean, for my job, I travel quite a bit. Usually I have all day meetings or meetings that start with physicians and surgeons early in the morning. And so my regularity before was, you know, 2 or 3 days a week if I was lucky, and Saturday. Once COVID hit, I was in town all the time. I went every day and started getting pre-runs and And so it was kind of that regular thing that Monday I knew I was going here, Tuesday I was going here, Wednesday. It was like you could figure, it's almost like you could only remember what day of the week it was by what site you were posting at, because everything else was almost the same all the time, right? And so that kind of regularity was a good thing during that time. But on my birthday, that Saturday, I actually led a workout to a small group of like 20. 18 or 20, and it was a good morning. It was fun, and it was the day I moved into respect category. But the shortly after that, they asked me to take over the Oracle crew, from Loman, and room service was infilling during the time there during COVID. And during COVID, we had a lot of guys that started working out at 6 on Saturdays, and so people were working out 6 and 7 when they decided to open the Oracle. That was also the transition of wait time to tater tot as Mantan. So I said, we're going to open the 2 sites, so we'll have 2 on Saturday. And I was kind of like, oh, well, I really wasn't planning on that. Are we having 2 different people there or what? And it just kind of happened. And so we had 2 sites or 2 times on Saturday. And over time, that just developed into the Saturday morning. We had 2 times, and for various weeks there's a lot of discussion. Well, do we need to split these? Do we need to run different? Do we need 2 people? Whatever. And it just never really developed beyond that. And I think it became part of my Saturday routine just to be at both. And it actually became one of those things that once you sign people up to queue and you're trying to get people to do it, I really felt a sense of responsibility to not leave them there. And so I went to both times. And I think there were once or twice that I missed. I missed one because of my COVID shot made me sick, and I couldn't go to either one. And one was the coldest day of the year, that frigid week. We had gone to workouts all week, and I pre-ran and went to 6, and I apologized to Wentworth. I was like, if I stay for 7, I think I'm gonna we've transitioned to cheap seats, which has been an awesome transition. He during the time he had gravitated to go into both workouts also, and so he was happy to take. Well, I hope he was happy to take that over. But that was a great. I think he's the right person for that. He's just acclimated to everybody so well. He was great. He connected with people very well, and he's kind of taken over that same ownership of both times. So I think it's worked out pretty well.
Just on that piece real quick, the last few interviews we've done, we've asked the former site Qs on how, I guess what went into the thought process on who we're going to have take over. Mm-hmm. Now with cheap seats, was it, he came out and reached out to you and said, hey man, I'm ready? Or was it, you were looking to pass, you kind of noticed he was displaying some leadership?
Yeah,
he was ready to go.
Yeah, he and I had been on a lot of pre-runs together, so working a lot of times together. On Saturdays, he was always there at both times. I don't know what originally drove him to be there for both times, but he would come. And there's a handful of guys that kind of on and off would go to both, and there's regulars for each time. There's a handful of guys that occasionally might go to both. He was there pretty much every week, and he really had developed a lot of relationships with people at both times. And we were running one day, and I said, we're looking to transition this. And at the time, my hope was to wait until we were back at Boys Town to do it, so I could actually be site Q at least 1 week at Boys Town. And I said, he agreed to do it. I think he thought about it for a little bit, and said he was interested in taking over Saturday. That was the easiest day for him. I know he travels a lot during the week too, and he was worried once COVID was done, a weekday site would be tough for him. So Saturdays would work out well. And we were talking about splitting the 2 times when we went back to Boys Town, but ultimately I think we always decided it was best to keep it as one thing, just 2 of them following each other. And he agreed to do it. And then it was just a matter of us waiting it out. In the beginning of the summer, we originally thought we were moving back to Boys Town in June, and they kept pushing it back. And we decided, we're not going to string this out. We just change it over, let cheap seats take over. And then once we did get news to go back to Boys Town, we planned for a thing there late in August that we had kind of to move back. So it's been good to get back there though.
I think I love Oracle has just always been a cool site at Boys Town, but we, when Boys Town closed and we moved it to Aldrich, it seemed like you did a really good job managing that. I'm curious too, just What do you think got you ready or sort of to that point, you know, maybe physically, emotionally, mentally to take on a site? I mean, I know you've led a lot of workouts, I think, you know, but anything sort of there that you recognize maybe internally that got you prepared to lead us an AO or?
Well, one being asked, said, hey, we want you to consider this. That's always a good first step. I hadn't really considered it necessarily at the time. I knew it might be coming at some point. I lived by a Golden Spike and thought, well, that might be a good one someday to be considered. But I mean, Wait Time came and asked me, he said, you're here pretty much every Saturday. We want you to think about it. And so I did. And, you know, there's a certain aspect of service, you know, once you're doing something for a little bit, you know, you're participating in reading cues and stuff. But at some point, I mean, F3 has meant a lot to me in terms of creation of relationships, creation of my, you know, all three F's really. And there's that aspect. It was time to start giving back in a more significant way. The thing I was most worried about is my social media abilities, which have grown significantly. It's funny, my office always wanted me to be on social media and tweet about stuff. And I was just like, you know what, do I really need to do this? And they'd always have me send them stuff they tweet out for the office. And so I think they were most happy that my Twitter presence expanded by my exercise program so that I actually use it for work now occasionally. And so they've been very happy about that.
I love that. See, after it's good for your work too. Tell me, you can hit on it a little bit there, but maybe second and third F. What's been sort of your experience the last 3 years in those areas?
Well, the first F was a good thing for me just from an acceleration standpoint. I needed to be pushed there. So the second F, I think the male relationship aspect of things, the fellowship part of it, which obviously a lot of people comment on, has been significant just to improve quality of relationships and the connection of relationships. You know, the expanse of people that you know in town, and it's crazy. It's like it's a different level of knowing that, you know, there's guys obviously you work out all the time, but there's guys that maybe you don't cross paths with, but they're an F3 guy, and you know there's maybe just a slightly different mentality than the general public for those people. And so there's a more like-minded aspect to a lot of aspects of our life. Obviously, there's different opinions on a lot of different things, and we all have different things going on. But generally, there's a perception of you want to be the best version of yourself you can, and not necessarily always for you, but for the benefit of others, right? For the benefit of your family, your ability to serve in other capacities, whatever the case is. Faith aspect of it, to me, I've been Catholic my whole life. I've always gone to church, and I've had service basically taught to me for a long period of time, even going to Jesuit high school, Creighton Club. There's an aspect of service always been taught, and it's been part of my life, but really instigating it, living it all the time, looking for opportunities tends to wane, especially when, you know, you get into life and work and family. So like one of the first things I dealt with, Plague, you and I and Notos did that Christmas thing at Abide, like my first 5 months or whatever, that first Christmas, we volunteered that Saturday, which I thought was one of the coolest things. One, because you could do it with people that you knew. So you had an aspect of community with your group, but the fact we were able to help, and now as F3's grown, the ability to help, you know, I think helping groups like Heartland Hope and the Pantry and this paint thing going on for raising money. And I mean, as a group, there's so much more powerful than just individually, but I think there's more opportunities and there's more responsibility to step up for those things than if you're just trying to be accountable for that stuff yourself. There's definitely a perspective of F3 members to know that there are things out there more important than yourself, and as a group we can be of more service to others.
I love that. You know, I like to think in the perfect world that if I wasn't an F3 and I never found it, I would be a person who felt a duty of service to the community and would go on and do these things. But the truth of the matter is, I was like that. I wasn't like that before F3. And I think you kind of hit on a key point there of being, well, you can go to some of these events with a group of people you know, so it's less awkward. There's not that initial barrier of I'm not going to know a soul there, and I've had some reservations of going. I think it's super important. So,
what I'm curious, as you've talked about, all 3 Fs and the Q source, and have you found, Q source, either the conversations or maybe a shield lock, or has some of the content helped to guide you on those different journeys, or has it been just all sort of interacting with other guys, or what's been?
I think, it's interesting. Q source gives you a frame of reference. I think it puts a thought process around a certain number of those topics that and especially since I've been doing it for a few years, and obviously that repeats. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because the discussion is different every time, but it's just kind of having it refreshed in your mind all the time has been a good thing. But the one thing to me that has helped it also is the book group that's neat that I know Greek Freak and girls have led some of those, and I haven't participated, I haven't gone to their discussions, which would be great, but some of the books that they have had and have read, I'm not a really fast reader, and I probably haven't been able to find time to keep up at their pace, but I've kind of followed them after a few weeks and picked up some of those books and read them for just my personal, because I think they're good things that we need to spend time focusing on, but I kind of reading them at my own pace. And so I have read some of those, which have been a huge help for me and my life and my marriage and relationship with my own, or at least putting things in my mind or frame of reference to be thinking about things a little differently and better. So those have been helpful, even without the discussion, because they're things I wouldn't necessarily have stumbled upon myself necessarily, but having that frame of knowing some guys are looking at those has been a big help. And you mentioned shield lock. For a while, thinking about shield lock of just being friends and guys in your group was one thing. I have gotten into a smaller shield lock group by invitation that has been beneficial to me, and I think long term we're hopeful of where that'll be going. So just having an opportunity to share some things off each other from our stage of life relative to some others has been good, and it's good to get some perspective, and you realize in a lot of things there you're not alone, and we know that as a group here, but sometimes you probably get into some other discussions, but realizing things that you're dealing with, there is somebody who probably understands your perspective more than you realize. It's just not the kind of stuff you stumble upon in life all the time, right? So
that's really cool. I don't know that I think even participating in those the book studies on Tuesday or now Thursday mornings, I don't think we even imagined or have thought through that there might be guys out there reading through those books on their own. And I love that, because that's, like you mentioned, you don't have to participate in the discussion or, but there are definitely some good content there. So I love that.
yeah.
We had talked a while back with Rollbar, and he kind of mentioned, there's sort of a big shield lock and a little shield lock, and kind of just creating space for guys to say it's okay, and it's actually purposeful to have a smaller group of guys that you maybe share more with. Have you found, you mentioned sort of being vulnerable at a larger Q source discussion has been challenging, but has the shield lock structure kind of given you an opportunity to share more deeply, or?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and even at the Q source level, I think there's a certain level of comfort with that group. Everybody kind of has a knowledge of what expectations are in that meeting, and you're not the professional in that day, or you're not trying to keep a certain face to lead others, or nobody's looking to you for something. You're able to be who you are and share what you think is important. The shield lock setting, I would say, gives us an opportunity to really kind of, gut check each other about how things are. Maybe there's a different level of discussion about things that are important to you or things that are affecting you that, maybe aren't necessarily something that are within a larger group you want to talk about. But it's, whether it's at that setting or the bigger setting, I still go, it has been amazing to me when you're in that situation to share the amount of things that people are dealing with are not necessarily, they shouldn't be a surprise to us, right? And they shouldn't be that the different things people are dealing with, and that the experiences we all have should be able to share or offer so that somebody else can benefit from them. I don't know that we always realize, and we've talked about this even in Q-Source before, even though you may not say a whole lot, I think people don't always realize the impact that they have just by how they work out or what they may have said to one person that day that you were near and hear. You hear so many things on a workout, you hear so many side discussions, and you may not have thought you had much of an impact on somebody, but your impact could be pretty significant, whether it was in a COT or just a discussion you're having at, a coffee afterwards.
I really like how you touched on not really knowing the significance of your output, right? It could be the smallest gesture. It could be the most brutal cue that you led.
Yeah.
I don't know. You never know what's going to resonate with someone. So I certainly appreciate that. I guess I would want to ask you, is there anything that comes to mind as something that stuck out to you during your time here that just really was impactful for you?
I guess in general, the amount of things people are willing to share about their life or what's bothering them has always been, early on it was surprising to me, but I hadn't really been exposed to a lot of that situation with other men on a regular basis, right? So the ability to reach a comfort level of being able to do that, or that people feel you're important enough for them to share that with you, has been interesting to me. I don't think people should think, and I would say I'd offer this. People may think that if I'm not sharing, I don't think they're that important. No, I just don't do that. So if I am, you're pretty important if that is the case. But the amount that people are willing to do that has been a shock to me, and it's been a benefit to me. I've always kind of been by myself, but the ability to have others around and challenge you and do different workouts, and your willingness to go because somebody else said they were going to be there. The challenge of not letting somebody down because you said, I'm going to be there tomorrow. And that's a huge pull for a lot of people. A lot of people mention that, but there's a responsibility and a reliability level there that kind of changes people's approach to fitness, I think. So anyway, it's funny, we were talking this morning at Q-Sort about consistency, and we said, I'm kind of a creature of routine and habit, and the fact of, you wake up at 4:15 to go to workout or pre-run every day is almost becomes nothing, because it's the routine of the day, and that's what you should do. And if you don't do that, the rest of the day becomes just way off kilter. It's something I experienced, and we did talk about that a little bit today. And that if you can get to the point in your life where missing your 4:30 or 5 o'clock workout in the morning is a problem, so they get you to go, that's probably a good thing.
I love that you mentioned that. I've been, preparing for, baby number 2. So I've been intentionally disrupting my routine, and it is hard. It's really challenging. Hey, on that topic, so I did, just doing my research, before the interview today, looked up some of your old back blasts, and you are a creature of habit, it turns out. I've noticed for your COTs, you like to reference, National Hop Apart Day or Chianti Day or Compliment. Any insight, because you have cued a lot and you deliver a really good beatdown in COT, any insight or advice you might give to a guy who's sort of on the fence with whether they're ready to lead their first workout or not for that BQ? Any advice you'd give?
No, I've pulled the national days a few times just because if interesting, it provides you a basis. Sometimes it's not very interesting, right? And actually, I'm queuing this Friday at the YAR, which Huffy asked me to do it, and I don't really like coupon workouts, and I have not queued there before, but I went to a workout there a few weeks ago. But my COT and my workout will not be based around National Day. So you can have that at least to know, but this will be over by this time. But for new guys willing to do it, you have to, I don't know that you realize how supportive of an environment this is. If you the first time doing something at work or a professional thing or school or whatever, you almost are on an island in terms of your performance expectation or whatever. But here, when I talk with VQ guys, when I was site Q, say, you know what, if you make a mistake, if you don't tell anybody, nobody's going to know. And there will be some things that are going to be obvious. And you know what, absolutely no one's going to care. What everybody cares about is that you're going to come back and that you're going to feel comfortable at the end of this. So that would be my advice, is accept any help anybody offers. Call on guys to do things because they're going to be more than willing to do it during your workout, and plan a little extra. And if you don't do it, nobody will ever know, unless you put in your back blast that you had extra planned and you didn't need it. Nobody will ever know that you had 3 things that didn't get done because you ran out of time. But they'll notice if you run out of time and you'd have nothing to do, right? So the biggest thing is just not worry about it, because everybody's going to be happy with what you've done, and it'll be fun.
I agree. I think the the VQ is always a blur for the guys anyway.
Yeah.
So you're on such a high afterwards that no one even knows you messed up. You probably don't even realize you messed up. So it's all good. I know you were kind of talking about the VQ for the new guys. I guess that kind of is a good segue into what advice would you give a new guy, like a guy that's just starting out? What would you impart with him?
You guys, I would say, lean in and come back. Whatever workout you did that day, whatever you've done 2 or 3 times, they're always going to be different. If you didn't like it, go to a different side. If it maybe wasn't quite what you were looking for, ask some of the other guys. Maybe there's a different site that does some different things. It's such a unique thing, F3, in terms of, people, is it a cult or whatever? I mean, it's such an odd thing for somebody to come across as an initial experience. And sometimes a first impression may not always be the best. And sometimes it might be awesome. But once you have gone a few times and get that comfort level, and obviously go to coffee. I didn't go to coffee for a long time, but once I started doing that's a whole different experience, just in terms of people's welcomeness and ability to bring you into the group. It's, I would say, just go enough times to make a truly informed decision about whether or not it's for you or not. Because there's so many levels to it that there's a lot of things to be for you in it. And there's so many things you might benefit from that you don't even know. So.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I think you touched on something that Noto's touched on too. It's, your first experience. It is kind of corny, right?
Yeah.
Let's not beat around the bush. It is corny to come, and the names are kind of corny, and the name of the exercises are pretty corny, but looking past that, there really is something there. So sticking around, checking out a new site. I love that advice.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to be respectful of your time and of Brandon's time, Plague's time. I was wondering if you could take us out with a good COT.
With a COT?
So this is the first time Plague's actually let me close out the podcast. So I meant name and Rama, but that's just my lack of experience speaking. So,
I was going to say, I started to prepare one for Friday. If you want me to give away Friday, I can give a preview for Friday. No. How about that?
No, we'll edit that out. Let's close the name of Rama.
Today is National American Beer Day, or
Oh, hey, that's not a bad one. It's not a bad one.
All right, I'm going to close out. John Whitworth, 30, Pony Express.
Pony Express.
Pony Express.
The Plague.
The Plague. Jeff Mazu, 51, Vandelay.
Vandelay, respect.
Vandelay.
Thank you.
All right.
Respect.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good
Yeah,
afternoon.
thank you. Later, guys.
Yeah.